Good evening. This is Tershia de Klerk in the studio for Africa Christian Action, Salt and Light on Radio Tygerberg. So our friend Justin is unable to join us tonight. However, we will continue with our topic, an overview of human trafficking. A few weeks ago, Justin and I had such an amazing discussion around this topic, and it's such an important topic for all of us to understand and be aware of. So I just want to, for your sake, if you weren't able to join us last time, just do a quick overview with regards to what we discussed. So we started off with Justin asking me exactly what is human trafficking. And what a perfect question to start off with, because it's so important for us to understand what it is and what it looks like. And a very simple way in how one can pinpoint a possible human trafficking situation is simply as follows. So human trafficking takes place when a person is either tricked, forced, or coerced into a situation for the use of their body or for their labor. So if that is the only thing that you take away tonight, it would definitely be worth your while. Just to remember that human trafficking takes place when a person is either tricked, forced, or coerced into a situation for the use of their body or for their labor. And what is also very interesting is with regards to the legislation of South Africa, we have an amazing act which is actually considered the best act globally for combating trafficking in persons. So TIP, or trafficking in persons, is just a fancy word used, or terminology used for human trafficking. And this act is called the PACO-TIP Act. So just very simply, it stands for Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons. Now, the PACO-TIP Act actually states that transportation is not a prerequisite for human trafficking to take place. So that is a point that is very, very important for all of us to be aware of and to understand, because together with our simple sentence of what is human trafficking exactly, it helps us to understand and also helps us to identify possible human trafficking situations. So I will definitely touch on that again and explain to you just a bit later what do we mean by transportation is not a prerequisite. And also just the term human trafficking is quite deceiving when it comes to the reality of what human trafficking really is. So also just to go through the various forms, or some call it the various phases of human trafficking. Very interesting and very important for us to be aware of. So most of us are very much aware of sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Now, those are the two forms of human trafficking that reach the highest percentage of victims. But then we also have other forms of human trafficking. And many of these forms are actually seen all around us. We are surrounded by it, and it's often actually right under our noses. So the one is domestic servitude. Then we have forced marriage or forced begging. And then we have organ harvesting and baby harvesting. There's also child soldiers. And then there's forced illegal activities. Very, very important to remember. Then illegal minors, or also known as zamazamas. We have snuff movies. Then there's also bachabazi, or it stands for boy play. And then forced online scamming. So the forced online scamming is something that within our national network here in South Africa, we have become more and more aware of. And that would fall under forced illegal activities. So remember, the emphasis is on forced. Okay, and then we also touched on some of the reliable statistics when it comes to human trafficking. And statistics are so important. It just gives a person such a better visual to the problem or the situation. So within our sphere of NGOs and professional individuals in South Africa that help combat human trafficking, we mainly trust statistics that come from the Global Slavery Index, also from the United Nations, and then from our National Human Trafficking Hotline. So yes, please note and remember that South Africa does have a National Human Trafficking Hotline, and I will share that number with you a bit later. So what are the stats at the moment? So on average, what we are seeing, and from what we know, there are at least 50 million people who are living in modern-day slavery currently today. In 2021, it was just over 49 million. So we are currently looking at 50 million plus. And out of that statistic, we've also seen that 22 million find themselves in forced marriage. So that is a very, very interesting statistic, just to think about that. So we're talking about 50 million people currently in modern-day slavery or human trafficking, and 22 million of those are found within the forced marriage phase of human trafficking. A21, who is one of the frontrunners in combating human trafficking globally, they have actually informed us with regards to their statistics. The 5 known ways that survivors were trafficked or are being trafficked globally are as follows. So the number 1 way is through false job advertisement. Number 2, sold by family, or it would normally be a friend of the family as well, sold by family or a friend of the family. Number 3 is the lover boy method. So that links in with online grooming quite a lot. And then trafficked by a friend comes in 4th. And then 5th only comes in abduction. Now, this is why it's so important for us to understand that human trafficking is so much wider than just abduction or a person going missing or basically just vanishing out of your life. It is something that we will see later on is right in front of us. So if we go back to the various phases of human trafficking, so why do I say that? I say that because we have people who are victims of human trafficking, and they are victims of maybe forced marriage or forced begging. How many of us see all these beggars at traffic lights or stop streets or a main crossing? And the last thing that we actually think of is that, this person could possibly be a victim. So what happens when it comes to forced begging is that a trafficker will either manipulate a person or coerce a person into begging. And there will also be consequences if they do not do as the trafficker requests. So the victim has to come back to the trafficker with either money or food or gifts. And if they don't, there will be some form of serious punishment. And of course, the traffickers love using threats. So I always say that the modern day shackle is fear. So that is what traffickers use mainly to keep their victims at bay as such. So then we also look at, organ harvesting is something very different. It's something that is more done behind the scenes. And then baby harvesting as well, child soldiers, there we are touching on something where it is very much in the open. But also what is happening is so many of our children are going missing, and they are taken into war-torn areas to become soldiers. The Zamazamas, who are the illegal miners, we see when it comes to the children especially, they are very much manipulated or forced into mining. And one of the main reasons is not only because they are so vulnerable, but also because of their size. So it's so much easier for them to get into all the nooks and crannies of the mines. And most of these mines have been closed down because they're not safe anymore. And then snuff movies, that is also something that would be done more in private or behind closed doors. Bachabazi, a practice that is more out in the open. Bachabazi stands for boy play, and that is something that stems from the north, where the children, mostly adolescent boys, are used to entertain older men and also for their sexual gratification. And then forced online scamming, also something that is more behind closed doors. But then we have the two most popular ones, sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Sex trafficking, when we talk about that, we think of prostitution, which is somewhat out in the open. We know of so many people who work within strip clubs and so forth that are also forced into sex trafficking, for instance. And then there's also the pornography industry, where so many people fall victim to sex trafficking, and they are filmed, and this gets released on the web, and sometimes in more extreme cases on the dark web. And then labor trafficking, I think this is also one of those faces of trafficking that is really out in the open, and many of us fail to actually notice. So there are some signs that we can look for, some red flags that we can look for to help identify a possible victim of labor trafficking. Domestic servitude would also very much fall under labor trafficking. So just a few things for you to think about and to whet your appetites. What we see in South Africa, though, is that approximately 160,000 victims are currently known to be trapped in human trafficking at any given time. And with all the statistics that we have looked at from our reliable sources, we are still sitting at only a 2% success rate in victims either escaping or being rescued. So what that says is that prevention is absolute key. You know, we're quick to say prevention is better than cure, but it is just so absolutely true. So prevention, how do we do prevention, is through education. And this is what I'm trying to achieve tonight, is to provide you with enough information to make you more aware of what human trafficking really is, what to look out for, and what can you do about it. So I do ask that you continue to follow us and listen to the program. My program will feature every second Monday of each month, and we will be speaking about this topic and elaborating, and our aim is to empower you. Justin also asked me, why is it that human trafficking is such a hidden crime? And I'm just so grateful for that question, because it is very much hidden. when we look at many years ago with the slave trade, it was all in the open. And now slavery has become a hidden crime. Why? Because it's often overshadowed by other crimes, such as drug trafficking, for instance, such as breaking and entering, or online scamming, just as a few examples. But we do know that some of the faces of human trafficking is forced illegal activity, for example. So it becomes quite complex. So many of the people who are considered to be, breaking the law, they are actually victims of traffickers. And that is what makes it so difficult at times. We also have so many immigrants that come into our country looking for a better future, and many of them cannot find help in a language that they understand. And the traffickers know this. Remember, we looked earlier and we saw that the number one way in which traffickers become victims of human trafficking is through fake job offers. So fake job offers is what is causing an influx of immigrants coming into our country, only to find that their identification documents are taken from them. They are in a foreign country. They are being forced into some form of labor. They are being threatened. The lives of their families are being threatened. And those are the shackles that are holding them or keeping them in that position of remaining a victim. And then we also see that, unfortunately, some victims, especially in the sex trade or in sex trafficking, they resort to accepting perks. And then from there, they become traffickers themselves. So within sex trafficking, there are perks if they are willing to become a trafficker themselves and to source new victims. And that would also ensure that their abuse is being reduced. So also, when it comes to South Africa, we tend to wonder, what is the contributing factors that lead or add to human trafficking? So one of the most obvious ones is high unemployment. And we don't only see foreigners coming into our country due to fake job offers. We also have South Africans who are falling for fake job offers within our country. And many of it is because of desperation. So high unemployment does play a very big role. And then we, of course, have our weak and corrupt borders, our weak and corrupt border control. And we have Muti. That is, again, where the baby harvesting and organ harvesting comes into. That also links in with cultural practices, which, again, is linked with forced marriage. One is well known as ukutwala. Ukutwala is a very beautiful cause of practice. However, it has been distorted throughout the years, and now we see that so many young little girls are forcibly taken from their homes and handed to an older man for sexual abuse, for domestic servitude, and so forth. And that can also fall under forced labor. Another contributor is absent parents or child-led households, which we know is so prevalent within our country, unfortunately. And then technology, of course. definitely adds to human trafficking, especially when we look at social media and how easy it is to communicate with a stranger via technology. And that is where online grooming comes in. That is where sexting comes in. And of course, pornography as well. And then prostitution, pornography, all of that adds to human trafficking. Pornography and prostitution specifically cannot exist without sex trafficking. So that's also something that is very important for us to remember. Right. So it actually makes me think of, when it comes to prostitution, what is the main problem? What is the root problem? And as a network, we strongly believe that the consumers and the sex buyers fuel the demand. As we know, wherever there's a demand, there will always be a supply. If the demand is decreased, the supply will decrease. And that is actually what we want. And that is where we need legislation to change. That is where we need to fight against any implementation of legalizing prostitution or fully decriminalizing prostitution, to be more accurate. So when it comes to tactics of the traffickers, we have touched on it briefly. The main tactics we need to always keep in mind of traffickers to lure and capture victims is false job offers, of course, but also we've seen false sport contractual offers and online grooming. Now, this is something that's very prevalent in South Africa, the false job offers, but also the false sports contract offers, and more specifically referring to soccer offers. So we have situations where there are boys who are practicing or playing soccer within their community, and traffickers come and promise them the world and then take them away, and many of them are not seen again. They are used either for sex trafficking, labor trafficking, maybe even as a child soldier. And this just reminds us how important it is for us as adults to educate our children, to explain to them what are the red flags and what can they do when something like this comes their way. And just while I'm there, I want to say, there are amazing opportunities out there, and we don't want to take that away from anyone, especially not from our children. But we need to teach our children, when they do receive any form of job offer, any form of sports contract offer, they need to go to an adult they trust to assist them in making the right decision. And here I want to pause and also mention the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So I will give you the number. It is a very easy number to remember and a good number to even put in your phone. So the South African National Human Trafficking Hotline number is 0800 222 777. Very important number to remember. As you can see, we are surrounded by trafficking victims every single day, and it can so easily happen to us or to our loved ones, or we can possibly even detect a possible trafficking situation. So that is why this number is so important. So you can contact this number anonymously. It is also a toll-free number. You can also go onto their website and report something online. And I think the best is to phone them. But They also do a job vetting, and they will also do contractual vetting. So I just want to encourage you, if you find yourself in a situation where you've been offered a job and something doesn't feel right, or you may be just very unsure, just want to be extra careful, you can contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, give them all the information you have, and they will investigate. And they will then come back to you and tell you that there are too many red flags to rather be cautious or to rather ignore, and they could possibly take the case further. And also when it comes to sports contractual offers, modeling offers, very important. Please use the tools that are available to you. That is just so vital so that we can protect ourselves and our loved ones against human trafficking. Well, that is all we have time for now. And I just want to thank you very much for joining us. We will definitely continue with this topic again in a month's time, and I hope you will join me. And just to end off with Galatians 5 verse 1, stand fast therefore in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again with a yoke of bondage. Good night and God bless.